Greetings, gaming historians, and welcome to Lord of Lore, where we break down the lore and history of our favorite video games and fantasies. And today, we're returning to the world of Amalur to discuss one of the darkest and most sinister forces in the game's cosmology, and that is the god of chaos, Telogrus. Featured prominently as the main antagonist of the remake's DLC Fatesworn, but also mentioned in the lore of the base game, Telogrus is a powerful god associated with the powers of chaos, the opposition of fate and order, as well as the chief god of the destructive Niskaru. And in this video, we'll learn all we can about this god's past and his potential in the future. Now, fair warning, there are some spoilers ahead. Let's discuss. To begin, let's discuss what we know about Telogrus in the original game before Re-Reckoning and Fatesworn. While he does not appear physically in the main game, he is still the ruler of the Niskaru, a reoccurring enemy that embodies destruction and allies themselves with the Tuatha Deon, destructive cults, as well as any enemies of those who support order. In fact, in the quest Natural Order, where Didenhill leader Kester Barclay asks the Fateless One to help rid the village of the Jotun in Coilsbane Cave, the player will find the wizard Balthazar using the Jotun as bodyguards while he creates an army of Fair Gorda to do his bidding. When confronted by the player, the first thing he does is swear by the power of Telogrus, giving him a connection to the god of chaos and his destructive intentions. And another mention of Telogrus' name can be found in the in-game book Niskaru 1 in St. Odwig's and Gorhart. According to the in-game text, the ancestors of the Arathian Mitharans were rescued by a darkness that predated the Deep Gloam. And from this darkness came a sinister chaos that the god of order Niskaru named Telogrus. According to this text, the children of Telogrus, likely referring to the Niskaru, were responsible for the darkness and destruction that attributed to the Deep Gloam, but Niskaru hid his followers underground until this age of darkness passed. Because of this text and the Fey lore stones found in a tier that describe the Dark Age under the Niskaru Lord Faragnos' rule, it is safe to assume that the Deep Gloam, a significant age predating history that is mentioned in almost every race's history, was in fact caused by Telogrus and his Niskaru minions. Now let's discuss Telogrus' role in the expansion Fatesworn. Because he is the main antagonist and is the driving force behind the DLC's many quests, I won't spend too much time describing every detail, but will rather give a summary of who he is and what he does. Firstly, it is important to remember that the Telogrus we fight in the game is not quite the Chaos God himself, but rather the apprentice of the Fate Weaver Skald Atlas by the name of Wolf. Atlas, in her quest to study the Fatesworn order of the ancient Mitharans and learn about how they combated the powers of chaos, she would regularly open portals into the Chaos Realm in her attempts to forge her own chaos weapons to fight fire with fire. However, as she brought Wolf with her time and time again, the young apprentice became more and more influenced by the evil forces around him, even hearing Telogrus' voice calling to him. When Wolf was finally convinced that he himself was Telogrus, the Chaos God possessed Wolf, he then set about opposing the forces of fate and order. By promising absolute freedom to his followers, Telogrus gathered a cult and set about weakening the already weakened Tapestry of Fate by kidnapping important individuals and killing them before their roles could be fulfilled. Then, in a tower where the Arathi had already weakened the barrier between the realms in their studies of the dimensions, he used the released chaos magic to open chaos rifts throughout the mountains of Mithros, portals to the Chaos Realm that released armies of Niskaru and chaos-infected beasts to wreak havoc. Telogrus then sealed himself in the Crownhold Castle behind an impenetrable barrier of chaos magic, forcing the Fateless One to follow Atlas's advice and forge a set of Fatesworn armor crafted by harnessing the power of chaos in the form of order. However, it is important to note just how influential Skald Atlas is during this quest against Telogrus. Sure, it is her apprentice that became Telogrus' avatar, and she had been studying the Mitharans and chaos power for years, but doesn't it seem strange that she knows so much about the Fateless One and his or her doings? In addition, she manages to join the Fateless One in Crownhold Castle without wearing the Fatesworn armor, and Telogrus even mentions her as an old rival. Of course, this could simply be Wolf showing anger towards his former master, but combine this with her uncanny power over order and chaos magic, and it seems to support some gamers' theory that Skald Atlas is more than she appears, almost as if she is some divine agent for Mitharu. Regardless of if this is true or not, the Fateless One manages to defeat Telogrus' avatar, but not before Telogrus promises that he will return. So now we ask the question, was Telogrus' promise to return true, or was it just an idle threat of a defeated villain? Well, to answer that question, we have to look to the plans for the Age of Ruin, an era that is significant to both canceled sequels, Project Evergreen and Project Copernicus. This era was a time of destruction, hardship, and persecution suffered by the major races of Amalur. And while most of these disasters were caused by invading armies like Jotun and Tirgash orcs, we know from several promotional videos that there was more to this Age of Ruin than meets the eye. That's right, it appears that similar to the Deep Gloam, the Age of Ruin was orchestrated by the powerful Niskaru lords and their minions. The Niskaru lord Amitai assisted the Tirgash in burning down the world tree Atiru, the All-Knowing. Brecthamore led the trolls to combat the Colossi, and Formalidon stole the orb of Aglosirith to reanimate an army of the dead. And who is over these Niskaru lords? You guessed it, Telogrus, the god of chaos himself. It appears that Telogrus' warnings were not an empty threat, and he spread the influence of chaos that led to massive anarchy and the destruction of several significant cities like Rathir and Edessa. Interestingly, even though the Colossi eventually drove back the forces of chaos and instituted the Age of Enlightenment, nowhere in the promotional material does it describe Telogrus himself appearing or being defeated. Even after the Age of Ruin, it appears that Telogrus is still out there, free to spread the forces of chaos against the races of Amalur. And that about does it for today's video. Telogrus is a powerful god of chaos, the sworn enemy of Matharu, as well as any races that support order and justice, including the Almain, the Colossi, and the Losofar, and it appears he will continue to be a serious threat for the remainder of the game's future. But what do you think? Will any future content explore the Age of Ruin and the influence of chaos? Will we see more of Skald Atlas or the powers of order combating Telogrus? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and please like and subscribe so my channel can grow. Feel free to comment what you would like to see next, new videos regularly. God bless!